Hi, I'm Andrea Kawabata, and I work for the University of Hawaii's College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources Cooperative Extension Service. I'm an extension agent serving Hawaii's coffee industry statewide, as well as orchard crop growers in West Hawaii. Today, I'll be presenting on recommendations for coffee pruning on hand-harvested farms, though some of the pruning methods are also used on mechanically harvested farms. There are many different ways to prune coffee trees depending on your individual needs and situations, and some folks consider pruning to be an art form. With that said, I'll be focusing on a few methods that are being recommended for current coffee pest and disease management in particular. Pruning coffee trees is essential for tree health, ease of care and harvest, and consistent production. By removing older branches and excess branches and foliage, pruning helps farmers manage tree height and density to make picking easier and to reduce disease, plant materials, and pest pressure. Pruning also helps to encourage new growth for plant invigoration and future crop production. Pruning coffee trees helps to open up the canopy and allow for better airflow and sunlight penetration to the leaves, branches, and base of the tree. With the arrival of coffee leaf rust, pruning and desuckering are especially important for not only removing infected plant materials, but to also dry up freestanding water in the canopy. If left, this water helps anthracnose, cercospora, and CLR spores germinate, survive, and spread. Pruning can also help to make spraying easier and more effective when trying to apply pesticides to the top sides and undersides of leaves, as well as leaves high in the tree canopy and low to the ground. Overall, pruning can help farmers accomplish other orchard tasks such as mowing, weed whacking, fertilization, and harvesting by making the orchard and trees more accessible. Fruits are a large sink for nutrients, so be sure to provide plenty of fertilizer through the harvest to support fruit development and ripening. When applying granular fertilizers, remember that water is needed to dissolve the granules, reduce volatilization or the release of chemicals like nitrogen into the atmosphere, and to remove the nutrients down to the root system and then up through the tree's vascular system. Consider applying a general NPK fertilizer at the end of the harvest season, before the dry season, and prior to pruning your coffee trees. Coffee trees must have healthy roots as well as adequate nutrition and energy to regrow strong verticals after pruning. While the focus may be on controlling coffee leaf rust, we can't forget about coffee berry borer management. Remember to strip pick all remaining green, semi-ripe, ripe, and raisin berries from the trees prior to pruning and process or destroy the strip pick. The small amount of coffee remaining in the trees after harvest is usually riddled with CBB. If left in the field, beetles from these berries will infest the new crop and cause defects to the green bean and production losses when sorted. In locations where rainfall creates year-round harvesting, continue to monitor and spray for CBB in the AB position at least monthly and throughout the year. This will help to kill CBB on the young berries and to reduce its population in the field and damages to the green bean. Coffee leaf rust spores are easily spread by wind, physical transference via tools, equipment, coffee pickers and other people, and animals, and with the splashing of water droplets from irrigation and rain. The weather, pruning style, and amount of time it takes for you to complete pruning are important factors in determining if you need to spray before, during, and or after pruning. Remember that free-sitting water, whether from rain or irrigation, is critical for CLR spore germination and for creating new infections and lesions on the leaves. It only takes about 24 to 48 hours for CLR spore germination and leaf infection to occur. So monitor your local weather conditions for rain events and adjust your spray schedule as needed. If the weather is dry, you may not need to spray with a fungicide, but be sure to spray before it rains again. If it rains unexpectedly, apply a fungicide as soon as you are able to get back out into the field. As long as all foliage is removed when stump pruning, spraying is likely not needed in those sections until new growth is generated. However, if hedging or selectively pruning, consider spraying if the weather is conducive to spore germination. Be sure to calibrate your sprayer before applying pesticides to determine the amount of water needed to spray an acre of coffee or total acreage and crop. This will help you to determine how much pesticide product to add per gallon of water or per tankful and to remain compliant with pesticide label instructions. Always read the pesticide product label and any special labeling before use, and follow all label directions. Re-enter the sprayed area of the farm after the restricted entry interval or REI time period has passed. This time period is specified on the product label. The label is the law and must be followed. Remember to always manage pesticide resistance by rotating between fungicides in different FRAC groups. A FRAC group listing for CLR products approved for use on coffee in Hawaii is available on Table 1 of the publication noted on this slide and in the recording description. For quick knockdown of CLR and a short REI, products like Oxidate 2.0 and 5.0 can be used. Organic and conventional pesticides must be handled, mixed, and applied properly for best effectiveness and for the health and safety of farm workers, handlers, consumers, and the environment. The timing of pruning is important for achieving production potential, though other factors must still be considered. Coffee trees are typically pruned following the harvest season and prior to the end of February to provide plenty of growing time before the summer solstice. After the summer solstice, which takes place around the 21st of June, sunlight and daylight hours begin to diminish. Photos in this and the following slide provide examples of how stumped pruning in March, April, and May compared to February can result in slowed vertical regrowth, which can then lead to reduced yields in the following years. These photos were taken in May of 2022. Notice the difference in regrowth of the second, third, and fourth stumps compared to the trees stumped in February. These photos of the same trees were taken 7 months later in December. Note the decline in overall vertical growth on stumps pruned in March, April, and May compared to February. While the timing of pruning trees can be dictated by the availability of labor, waiting to prune after the winter solstice but before the vernal equinox is generally recommended because of the combination of cooling temperatures and diminishing daylight hours that can slow coffee root and shoot growth. The winter solstice marks the shortest day of the year, and the vernal equinox marks the beginning of spring. Beware of drought and prolonged dry weather during the early winter months. Pruning too early can sometimes coincide with drier than normal conditions in October and November, as what happened in 2019 and 2021, leaving coffee trees water stressed and less able to draw up adequate water and nutrients to energize the roots and stump. This added strain, coupled with the stress of a heavy crop and poor fertilization, can increase the chances of tree death, particularly when stumping. With that said, coffee trees in a small demo field at the Kona Research Station in Kealakekua were stumped in November, December, January, February, March, and May of 2023. At the end of January of 2024, this photo was taken of the plot. When given a 0 to 5 rating for tree regrowth and vigor, with 0 being dead and 5 having healthy regrowth, trees stumped in November to January fared best, followed by February, March, and then May. While many farms continue to harvest through January, those able to prune earlier may have an advantage of more vigorous regrowth. Reasons to prune during other times of the year may include the removal of branches damaged by disease, pests, wind, and mechanical or physical injury to prevent further harm to the tree. Black twig borer is a common pest of coffee branches. Beetle damage can be identified by the yellowing and or flagging of leaves that later turn brown as the lateral branch dies, as well as verticals, especially in areas where trees are stressed and borer population is high. A hole or holes about 1 millimeter in diameter, which is caused by the beetle, can typically be found on the underside of the lateral branch or on the sides of young verticals. To manage with pruning, find the hole or holes and trim to remove the entire section of infested branch, including the hole, as shown by the dotted red line. Do not trim and drop these branches on the ground, as the beetles will return to the trees and cause additional damage. Be sure to remove and destroy the branches from the field by doing such things as bagging in an enclosed heavy-duty trash bag or container and leaving in the hot sun, burrowing at least 6 inches deep and preventing escape, or burning with an approved agricultural burn permit. Using the proper sharp tools makes pruning faster, easier, as well as safer. Sharp tools create clean cuts, and clean cuts heal quicker and more completely than jagged ones. When wounds are able to heal well, this prevents pests and diseases from entering the cut surface and causing secondary problems. In turn, Healthy trees are more likely to live and produce fruits for a longer period of time. Be sure to service your tools and equipment at least annually and before the pruning season. Have them sharpened, greased, and lubricated for smooth running and cutting. If parts are broken, missing, or rusty, have them repaired or replaced. And be sure to refill and replace oil and gas mixtures so the equipment runs properly. Pruning with a chainsaw that is in need of sharpening, maintenance, or chain replacement can create crooked and jagged wounds that don't heal properly, create heat on the wood when cutting, and take longer to cut through wood, thereby causing workers to spend more time than is needed to prune. Pruning small diameter branches with the chainsaw can rip and tear the wood. Instead, use pruners or loppers to trim these branches or desucker them when they are still succulent and green. Unless cutting small branches and a few trees, hand sawing is very time consuming. When pruning, use personal protective and safety equipment such as gloves, chaps, shoes, long sleeve shirt, pants, eye and ear protection, sunscreen, and a hat. Have a first aid kit ready and available, as well as access to a phone in case of an emergency. Prevent heat exhaustion and heat stroke by staying cool and hydrated with water and electrolytes. Before we go into the styles of pruning, there are a few things you should know about coffee tree morphology. Coffee trees are a little different from other fruit trees as they have two forms of growth, orthotropic and plagiotropic growth. Orthotropic branches typically grow vertically and are commonly referred to as verticals, while plagiotropic branches grow at an angle or horizontally and are known as laterals. Pruning back laterals will not create verticals and vice versa. However, a pruned lateral can create additional laterals, and a pruned vertical can create additional verticals. So, unless you want a very low-growing coffee tree, it is also not recommended to graft with or make cuttings from lateral branches. Both vertical and lateral branches have nodes. Even the stump has nodes. Nodes contain buds or active cellular growth points, where vegetative growth develops or flowers emerge and then turn into fruit. The pruning and topping of verticals and trimming of laterals eliminates dominance of the branch apex and causes dormant buds at nodal points below the cut to become activated. That's when new verticals, suckers, water shoots, and secondary or tertiary laterals can be encouraged to develop on the branch or stump. It's important to understand the location of nodes and about apical dominance so you can better direct the emergence of new verticals and laterals and avoid pruning them off completely. When trying to maintain productive and healthy trees, understanding vertical and lateral age and their influence on fruit production is important. You can prune the wrong branch, you can prune at the wrong time, and you can prune the wrong place. Hopefully this drawing will help. Please keep in mind that this drawing does not portray actual production of coffee cherries on the branches. So let's say you stump a coffee tree and remove all of its branches. New growth will appear on the stump. These new branches will develop as first-year verticals. In their first year of growth, the branches elongate and leaves are produced, but not fruit. In their second year of growth, the vertical and lateral branches get taller and longer, and some fruit is produced on their laterals. In some cases where healthy, lower elevation trees are grown, second-year verticals can have a substantial amount of production. In their third year of growth, as long as the tree is healthy, a large crop of coffee is produced. It is during this year that the tree's energy and resources is spread between fruit production and vegetative growth. While secondary laterals may develop, elongation of the primary verticals and laterals slows. The tree develops a dense canopy because of the development of these secondary branches. With the weight of production and the pulling of verticals during harvest, the verticals tend to bend over, making it more difficult to accomplish tasks such as spraying, fertilizing, and mowing. In a vertical's fourth year of growth and beyond, the tree's energy and resources is further split between elongating its laterals and verticals, growing additional secondary verticals and laterals and even tertiary laterals, and producing fruit. Cherry production is also high, but the canopy becomes very dense and tall if not already bent over. Verticals that have not bent over become difficult to nearly impossible to bend without breaking during harvest, and ladders may be needed, which increases risk and accidents. Spraying, harvesting, fertilizing, mowing, and other cultural tasks become even more difficult to complete. It is because of these challenges that it is currently not recommended to retain fourth-year verticals unless absolutely necessary. 4 main pruning methods are used in Hawaii, in which coffee trees are stumped in blocks or large areas, or stumped in rows, otherwise known as the Beaumont-Fukunaga style of pruning. Trees can be stumped outright, or a nurse vertical can be left until new growth develops. Coffee trees are also pruned in the Kona-style, where the oldest verticals are selectively pruned and removed each year. Lastly, hedging is typically used on mechanically harvested farms, but can also be hand done by removing the top and most of the length of the lateral branches. Because of the arrival of coffee leaf rust and coffee berry borer, it is recommended that farmers highly consider transitioning their farms to block stumping a third of their orchard acreage each year. As with the transition from one style of pruning to another, initially there is a reduction in harvest. However, when done right, the long-term benefits of block stumping can outweigh the initial losses and help growers manage CLR and CBB. Compared to other pruning methods, block stumping can help farmers reduce costs by minimizing spray applications for pest and disease management, can help to synchronize the harvest, and is a style of pruning that is easy to train workers on, and is relatively quick to accomplish compared to other pruning methods. Granted, the trees must be healthy enough to withstand this severe style of pruning. When block stumping a farm, 1/3 of the acreage is stumped each year, leaving 1/3 with first-year production and 1/3 with second-year production. In the first section, the trees are stumped after the final harvest. All verticals, laterals, foliage, and fruit must be removed. This is a good opportunity to replant dead, dying, and unproductive trees, and to keep all trees in this section on the same pruning and production cycle. As regrowth appears, coffee leaf rust will be minimal on the new growth, and coffee berry borer spraying is not needed. About 3 months after stumping, desucker the stump and reduce the number of verticals to 3 per stump. Some trees may be able to handle 4 verticals, but make sure that CBB and CLR is managed properly. We will go more into detail about desuckering in a follow-up presentation, as desuckering is also very important. The second and third sections should be stumped in the next 2 years following the harvest. If transitioning from another pruning style to block stumping, the remaining 2 sections will need to be selectively pruned to maintain production on those trees. Second and or first year verticals should be retained on these trees for maximum production prior to stump pruning. Desucker any excess verticals, and again, a recommended 3 verticals should remain on each tree in sections 2 and 3. Researched in the 1950s, John H. Beaumont and Edward Fukunaga introduced a style of stumping to farmers that dehorned a quarter of farm acreage by rows. This method has since been named after Beaumont and Fukunaga and is still employed on farms to this day with a sequence of either 1 or 2 consecutive rows stumped. However, with the introduction of CBB and CLR, the recommendation is to set a 3-year rotation instead of 4. Without good control of CBB and CLR, high infestation and infection can take its toll on yield and coffee quality in a 4-year rotation. Once again, the stumped trees should be desuckered and 3 verticals retained per tree. For optimal photosynthesis, growth, and production, the order of row age should take into consideration the path of the sun and shading from nearby rows. The BF method can help with CLR and CBB management, but it's not quite as effective as block stumping, since neighboring productive rows can reintroduce beetles and rust to stump rows that have once again regrown and started producing coffee. And while many of the benefits are similar to block stumping, again, the trees must be healthy enough to withstand the removal of all verticals and laterals after the harvest season. Retaining a nurse vertical can help coffee trees survive the shock of stumping, especially under situations where the trees are aged, unfertilized, or underfertilized, have root damage caused by coffee root knot nematode, when pruning must be done during a drought, and if the trees are grown on very rocky soils and without irrigation. The nurse vertical is meant to continue feeding the stump and roots until new growth can take over that role. The nurse should not be left on the tree and should be removed in a timely manner. When new growth emerges from the stump and is about 2 to 3 inches tall, the nurse vertical should be removed. Its removal is critical for the management of CLR and CBB and for the health and productivity of the new verticals. Again, don't forget to desucker the new growth about 3 months later. Historically, with Kona-style pruning or selective pruning, each tree has 3 to 4 verticals of different ages. At the end of the harvest season, the oldest vertical is pruned off to make way for a new vertical. Today, because of CBB and CLR, it is recommended to have a total of 3 verticals on each tree for ease of spraying, harvesting, and other cultural practices. While some trees may be able to handle 4 verticals, again, be sure that CBB and CLR is managed properly. After removing the oldest vertical, all other excess verticals and laterals should be removed and desuckered. This method of pruning allows each tree to continue producing cherry each year. But while this may seem like a good thing, it allows existing CBB to spread from old crop to new berries and for CLR to spread from older leaves to new foliage from year to year. So there is a need to manage CBB and CLR annually and on all trees within the farm, thereby adding to labor, pesticide, and other associated costs. Compared to stump pruning, the Kona-style requires a level of knowledge, training, and skill to decipher which branch is oldest and which to prune off. Those new to the pruning style can take longer to prune and remove the wrong branch, causing a reduction in yield for multiple seasons. One of the benefits of the Kona-style of pruning is that this method is relatively gentle on older and stressed trees and has a better survival rate than with stumping. Hedge pruning is typically employed by mechanically harvested farms because of large acreage and the ability to use machinery to prune. The coffee trees are topped and the laterals cut back on both sides of the row. Intersecting laterals between trees are usually not pruned. Berries and leaves remain in the tree, and so until the trees are stumped for new vertical selection, there is limited control of CBB and CLR with mechanical hedging. Hand hedging coffee trees has been done, and a project at the Kona Research Station revealed some pros and cons of single vertical and double vertical hedge pruning. First off, hand hedging is very time consuming, having to hand prune each lateral down to its 3rd or 4th node and remove any verticals not being hedged. As the new growth came in, the trees became very bushy, having multiple secondary laterals on each branch. In the 2nd year of growth, the trees were extremely dense as tertiary laterals also developed. Because of the thick and droopy canopy, spraying for CBB was difficult and harvesting was slow as berries were hidden behind leaves and branches. At the time of this trial, CLR was not present, but one could only imagine how much effort it would take to spray for CLR as well. And while the trees were shorter than those that were stumped and selectively pruned, the hedged verticals were unbendable for harvest, and so tree height must be considered when manually hedging and adjusted to picker height. Or ladders and benches must be used, which then becomes a liability. Umbrella pruning is another offshoot of hedging and topping. With this style, the upper laterals are allowed to grow and produce, and the lower laterals are removed, giving the trees the appearance of an umbrella. Unless necessary for high first-year production, hand hedging is not recommended. These next slides will go over additional tips on how high to cut and where to cut on a branch, size of the pruning wound and angle of cut, and the proper pruning technique to aid in healing of the branches and regrowth for future production. In general, verticals and stumps are cut at a height of approximately 18 to 24 inches above the ground. But where to make the cut on a vertical is important too. Nodes can be found on the vertical and at multiple locations on the stump. And since new verticals emerge from nodal areas where axillary buds are present, pruning cuts should be made just above a node. Leaving too much wood or internodal area above a node can encourage poor wound healing and dead wood. While pruning, remove as much dead, dying, and diseased wood as possible that may encourage pests such as banana moth and termites. For large verticals, and especially those already bent over, make at least 2 cuts. The first cut removes the top weight and a majority of the lateral branches. The final cut removes the remainder of the branch to the height and location preferred and any laterals below this cut. Removing the top weight first helps prevent ripping and cracking of the branch. Try to avoid having the lowest laterals touch the ground. Where possible, prune off a portion of or the entire lateral to help discourage mobile pests such as greenscale, ants, and mealybugs from walking up these branches and infesting the coffee trees. Management of these pests will increase labor and pesticide use and could drain the tree of its energy meant for cherry production and growth. Cut verticals and laterals at about a 90-degree angle to the direction of the branch angle, leaving the smallest wound possible. The larger the angle of the cut, the larger the wound surface area that needs to heal, and this can prevent callus formation and increase disease and pest introduction. If in a rainy environment where, for example, you receive 100 or more inches of rain annually, a slight 1 to 5% angle that allows water to drain away from the center of the stump may help encourage drying and healing of the wounds and stump. When pruning, callus formation and wound healing are important for tree health and longevity, the development of new growth, and the productivity of coffee trees. This is what the cut surface of a vertical or stump should look like. Callus is formed around the cut edge, which helps to seal the exposed tissue and protect the branch from infection and pest infestation. Ripping, tearing, and the breaking of branches reduces wound healing and encourages the introduction of diseases and pests into the cut surfaces. It also increases the likelihood of branch and stump death and reduces the generation of new growth. These photos show various pruning issues, including accidental cuts that create open wounds in neighboring branches and cause branches to break, wide-angle cuts that leave a large wound site, and jagged cuts from rush pruning and dull chains. Again, these problems can lead to the introduction of pests and diseases, dead branches or portions of the branch, decreased regrowth, and a loss of production. If this is happening to you, try to slow down a little and try to make more deliberate movements with your tools. Pruning is also a good time to cut trees that are dead or dying, badly infected by disease and pests, and consistently have poor production. Once removed and the soil prepped, replant with a grafted tree, especially in areas where coffee root knot nematode is present. Prune verticals and laterals should be retained at the farm site. Mulch your prunings into the rows with a flail mower or chipper. If you are concerned about the spread of CLR, chip, pile, and cover the mulch for at least 6 weeks to kill live CLR spores. Once spread, the mulch will break down and contribute organic matter and nutrients to the soil, which becomes available to the plant roots and helps to nourish the trees as it is taken up. So just as a quick overview slide, first off, when you prune is just as important as how you prune. As much as possible, get your pruning done before the end of February to give the trees plenty of time to regrow before the summer solstice. No matter which style of pruning you choose for your farm, make sure you understand the pros and cons of the different styles and why you are selecting one pruning method over another. If you are converting from one style of pruning to another or attempting changes in how your trees are pruned, look ahead and think about how your trees and production will look 3 to 5 years down the road. Be sure your workers are trained properly and understand how you want the trees pruned. Use the proper tools for efficiency, safety, and precision. Be deliberate in your cuts and produce smooth, clean wounds that will heal quickly and well. Remember that every oops cut, every wound that doesn't heal, every hour longer it takes to prune, every branch that doesn't regrow, and every stump that dies is costing you. And lastly, don't forget to desucker the new growth. Although this presentation does not go into detail about desuckering, it is an extremely important task that makes verticals stronger, trees healthier, and production greater. Thank you for your time. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the current agencies who provide funding and support for our coffee extension program and outreach efforts, as well as faculty and staff who assisted in the creation of this presentation. If you have any requests, questions, or concerns, please feel free to contact me. You can also visit hawaiicoffeeed.com for additional information on producing coffee in Hawaii, as well as for outreach events and announcements. Thank you.